Hi, Computer Science 2 class. It's Mrs. Miskin, and it's time for lesson 19 in code.org on functions. Okay, functions are really helpful. If you have code that you want to use over and over again and not have to write it out, we've used those in Computer Science 1, so that should be fairly familiar. You need to first define the function. So here's lesson 19. Screen 1 is just the overview. Define a function. Remember, if you come back to this screen, you can click on it and it will take you to an explanation document on code.org where it will show examples of different functions. Okay, and then you also need to call a function. So you define it, you write out what that function is, what it's supposed to do, and then somewhere in your running code, so in this case, it'll be in the draw loop or above the draw loop, you just need to call it. So you bring in a block to call that function. So we'll go over what that looks like. So screen 2 is the video. Go ahead and watch that on your own. Screen 3, calling functions. Functions let you build your own blocks and decide what code goes inside of them. This program has already created 2 functions, but only one is being called. So let's look and see what functions have been created. These look like the draw loop. Okay, make sure when you are naming functions, don't call it draw. We already have a draw loop. Make it something else like this. So here, on line 1 is an example of a function being called. Okay, so you just see the name of the function. That means you want that particular code to run right then. Underneath it, this is how we define a function. So starting on line 4, this is draw sky. And then down below is draw balloons. Okay, and there's lots of different code, ellipses and strokes, lines. Okay, so the object of this, only one of these is being called. We see that draw sky is being called on line 1. We need to be able to call the second one. Let's see what it looks like first. Okay, so there's our sky, our draw sky function. But we want the balloons to come up. So we would go to the functions. Now you have a functions tab in your toolbox. And this first one lets you create a new function. And the second one is what calls the function. So you would drag this one in. Now, do I want to call it before or after my draw sky? Let's try after. Remember, draw sky is a background, and we want that to be layered first and then sprites and things to go on top of it. Okay, so now inside of here where it says my function, I would type in draw balloons and make sure that you spell it exactly the same as your function. In this case, the B is capitalized. So now if I hit run, I have the sun in the background and the balloons. Okay, let's go on to number 4. All right, naming our functions and then calling them in the order that we want them to be called in. So remember, order matters. In this case, we have a draw background. So think of where you would want that one to go. Draw trees, draw clouds, draw fence. Okay, so your first step would be to drag in the blocks to call the functions. Now you can call the functions above or in between or below where you've actually defined the functions, but keep in mind that they will run in the order that they are called. So if I were to call draw trees at the top, and then maybe down here, call the draw background, it's going to draw the background on top of the trees. We don't want to do that. Okay, so you would drag in 4 of these call function blocks, change the names from my function to these function names like draw background, draw trees, and the other, and then put them in the right order. Sometimes helps to keep them all together. So if you're going to call the functions, put those together. And then if you're going to define the functions, put those together too. Okay? All right, I'll let you do that one. That one should not be too difficult. Okay, for this one, you're going to need to answer the question. So look at the code. Here it's calling draw red. Then it defines the function draw red. Then it defines the function draw green. And then calls the function draw green. Okay. So look at these questions and go ahead and answer that and then run and see if your prediction was correct. You won't be changing any of the code on this one. Okay, number 6, calling a function inside the draw loop. Okay, we have been calling them outside of the draw loop and they work, okay? But maybe we need to call them inside the draw loop because it's based on a condition or we want it to be drawn over and over and over again. One note right here on the screen, don't create functions inside the draw loop. I would prefer that they're underneath the draw loop. So you have maybe your variables at the top and all of your initial settings. And then you do your draw loop and then underneath that, write out, define your functions, okay? So this one, a function that draws a background has been created, all right? A sprite has been created to move across the background. Call the function inside the draw loop so that the sprite appears on top of the background. So order matters, all right? So if we have a function here called trees background, we want to call it. So you're going to want to come to the functions in Toolbox and grab out this block that calls the function and put it inside the draw loop. Now, you determine if it needs to go before or after the draw sprites. And if it doesn't work the way that you think it's supposed to be, change it. Okay, screen 7. This is part of a larger project. Okay, so we're going to come back to that one in another screen. Calling functions multiple times. Sometimes you create the code. Now, functions, we want them to be used over and over again, right? That's why we put it into a function, not just write the code over and over. So we want this code to be called or used multiple times. So let's look here. The code creates a sprite that moves across the screen one time. How can you make it go back? All right, so the function is already called at the beginning of the program. So let's look here at line 3. Remember, you can call a function anywhere in your code, but order matters. Okay, so set flyer. Let's look down and find that set flyer. Okay, so it sets an X and a Y and a velocity. Okay, so we want it to go back across the screen. All right, so we've got the function. Read the condition of the if statement. Okay, so our if statement right here says if flyer X, so if the X position is less than -50. So that would be if it's gone off the screen. We want to reset it so that it will keep looping, right? So we have this function called set flyer. Maybe, not maybe, we would grab out this calling the function, put it inside of the if statement so that it will continue to reset the position. We set it one time up here so that it starts going as soon as it's a run. And then we want it to continue doing that same thing. So we would put it inside of the if. okay? And there's our trees background, which is set up here. Okay. And then you can test it out if you like. Okay, screen number 8. Okay, make changes to the set flyer function. So this is the same one that we used last time. So that the flyer starts at a random Y location between 0 and 400 and moves at a random velocity. Okay, so every time that this flyer gets moved back, we want it to change. So we make a change here in the function. So random Y. So you're going to make a change to this line right here, the flyer.y. So instead of having it go to 200, we need a random Y location. Okay, and a random velocity too. Okay, so you would make changes to those 2 lines of code. And then every time that it is called, either at the beginning or inside of your draw loop, it will use those new codes. Okay, number 9. This program draws a daytime or a nighttime scene depending on the location of the mouse. Okay, so here's an example of the nighttime screen over here. Okay, so write the draw night function, which has been created but is empty. So all the code for it to work is already in here. In our draw loop, we've got the first if statement. If the position of the mouse, the Y position of the mouse is greater than 200, we're going to draw the day. Otherwise, we're going to draw night. Okay, so draw night is right here and it is empty, but it needs to look like the picture. So for example, go ahead and hit the run so you can see what the daytime scene looks like. Oh, and mine didn't come up for you. I'm sorry. Go ahead and hit that run if you need to and see what the daytime scene looks like. Now, an easy hint on this one, we want all of the same positions for all of those shapes. So you can copy all of these different codes inside of draw day and paste them into draw night. And then what you'll do is just change the colors so that they match the picture. So instead of having a lighter blue background, you're going to have a darker blue one for the nighttime. And then your sun is not going to be yellow, it's going to be this grayish color. Okay? All right, number 10. Practice writing functions on your own. This is a game where a coin falls from the sky and the bunny tries to catch it. Okay, so in this step, all we need to do is write the function that sets up the coin. Read and run the code. So let's look through it. We've got a variable here for the coin, and we're setting the animation to the coin gold and then setting the coin. So we know that there's a function that sets the position of the coin. We'll look at that in just a minute. Next, we're going to declare the variable for bunny and for score and set it to 0. Okay, in our draw function, we have a white background first. And then if key down is left, the bunny's going to move its X position. If the key down is right, it will move its X position in the opposite direction. So your bunny is going to go from side to side. Okay, and then if the coin's Y position is greater than 400, meaning if it's gone down below, we need to reset it. So there's that set coin calling that function right there. Remember, we set it up at the very top also. And then we have some text that will create a scoreboard on our screen. And then here in the set coin, this is where we set the positioning for the coin. So let's run it. All right, I've got the bunny here. If I move left and right with the arrow keys, the bunny's moving. There is my score, the text and the variable, and here's this coin, but it's not moving. There are 3 properties that we need to give it so that it will move. We need to have the X position, the Y position, and the velocity be set, okay? So you should have 3 lines of code inside of the set coin. You can go back to earlier lessons. I think we used some things like that too, where the position would just be reset, okay? That's number 10. So all you do is create the code inside of set coin for number 10. Now 11, we need to add an if statement to check if the bunny is touching the coin. Okay, so in our draw loop, we have here if for left, if it's right, and then another setting for if the coin goes off the screen. So somewhere in here, probably after that last if statement, you can add another one. So let's go ahead and pull that in. And we want to check if the bunny and the coin are touching. So we need to grab a is touching and put that as the condition for the if. So we've got bunny and coin. Okay, so there's a couple of things that need to happen. Increase the score when the bunny catches the coin. And then reset the position of the coin after it's been touched. All right, so we want to have some code inside of this if statement that will increase our score variable. We know how to do that using the counter pattern. And then we're going to call that set coin function again so that the coin will go back to the top and come down again. All right, and then this third line says play the game, randomize the velocity of the coin to a range that you think is fun. So maybe it would be more fun if it's really slow one time and really fast one time. All right, last one, number 12. Change the background with the score. Once you've caught 10 coins, we want to change the background. So we're going to use an if statement. So again, in your draw loop, here's our if statement to reset the coin and increase the score. Now we could add another if statement underneath it that says if the score is greater than 10 or equal to 10. So let's write that out using a math block. So if score is greater than 10, or in this case, I don't have the greater than or equals, I could type it in using text, or I can just put if the score is greater than 9, okay? So that it will change when it gets to 10. All right, use an if statement and 2 separate functions to draw the background. All right, so we have just a plain white background, don't we? White background inside the draw loop. Okay, so we would maybe, there's a couple different ways you can do this. You would create 2 functions, one for a plain background and one for a fun background. Define those down here underneath your set coin. And then what I would recommend you do is up here, change this, take off this background white, and call the function that is what you want it to be, the background that you want initially. Okay, then down here in this new if statement that we just created that checks the score, then you would call that fun background so that once you get to the score of 10, it changes to a new background. Okay, and you can always make that even more interesting by adding different steps. maybe if the score is greater than 20 or 30. Okay, so that is lesson 19. 13, screen 13 is just an overview of functions again, just reminding you how to draw them, how to call and create. Okay, so that should hopefully get you through lesson 19. 20, 21, and 22, you're using everything that we have learned to this point to create 3 different games. 2 of them will be defined by code.org, and then the third one, lesson 22, you create your own game based on all the things that you know. Hey, I look forward to seeing those games. Let me know if you have any questions with number 10, or sorry, with lesson 19. Thank you.